All right, we are rolling. It's another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It, and I am so freaking excited about this. There are 4 people on the screen right now. I'm going to walk everybody through it right to left. Right below me, actually, let me start right below me because that is Teresa Porter, who I am working with to put on this incredible grief relief event. How are you, Teresa?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited to be in the company of all of this and have a conversation of what our retreat really is about.
It's going to be so fun. And then to your right on my screen is Rob Boyle, who's going to be running the equestrian therapy portion of our grief relief. And you can actually hear the horse in the background, which is the coolest part of this thing. So, Rob, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Matthew.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this. We normally work with trauma and different other things as phobias and stuff like that with the horses and people. And so the grief part of it is a huge part of what, I mean, a major part of society and global society go through every day
Yeah.
and get to and experience. And people need to know how to work through these things. And my part in it is to share what horses go through. They go through similar things as people do. You know, they go through the traumas, they get PTS, they have phobias, fears, anxiety. They grieve the loss of their herds or a particular individual that they hang out with. So it's no different in their world than it is in our world.
This is going to be so fun to learn. And then you talked a lot about grief, and that's why the woman in the top right is here. She is a grief specialist and has been doing this for most of her adult life. And her name is Jill Reed. Jill, welcome to our podcast. Or Jill
Good
McMahon, I'm sorry,
morning.
welcome to our podcast.
I'll answer to anything, Matthew.
No, well,
Call
I
me
don't know what I
Kim,
got that
and I
wrong
will answer.
earlier.
Good
And
morning,
I,
guys.
and I did that to your other friend too. I think I called her. Anyways, it's a long story. Jill McMahon's been on the podcast plenty of times.
Yes, sir.
People are familiar with Jill,
Good to
and
see you guys.
yeah. How are you doing?
I'm great. I am like so excited to be diving into this with you
Yeah.
guys, and kudos to the three of you
Mm.
for putting your passions together and developing something that is really unique. I'm in my room, my office right now. I'm in the therapy office, and talk therapy. Of course, I'm going to be a cheerleader for, but there are so many other ways to process and heal. And having the three of you put this together and then knock on my door and ask if I'll just kind of sit back and participate a little bit has been an honor. It's going to
A
be very
little.
cool.
A little. You're gonna have your hands full. You wait for it. So, it's called a grief relief retreat. That's what we're gonna put on, and it's gonna be October 14th. It's up in Scottsdale, and we've got the whole landing page built for people to go and investigate it further. So if they want to kind of see what they're getting themselves into. But our day is going to start off, and I'm just going to walk through the day really briefly. The day is going to start off with some breath work and some movement, which will be led by you, Teresa. And then we're going to get into the equine therapy. Then we're going to have this really beautiful river ceremony. And then we're going to have a delicious meal around a campfire. And Jill is going to facilitate a great discussion around grief. And so that's kind of a snapshot at what the day looks like. I think the first thing we should talk about as a collective group here is who is this for? Now,
Mm.
I know that we've said it, we want you to be a minimum of 3 weeks or 3 weeks, 3 months out of your grief. But Teresa, in your opinion, I'll let you go first. Who is this for?
Well, for me, this didn't start unpacking my grief from 37 years ago. So this has been decades of not realizing that it was there. And I came across equine therapy for my daughter, my youngest daughter, who we're looking for resources to recover from a concussion. And little did I know what it was going to unpack for me. So, like two sessions in, there was some awareness, but the third session in was so powerful for me because we got to observe Rob working with the horse in the pen, and then the second half, another trainer invited people into the pen to work through stuff. And so as the group, I think there was like 50 people there, were sharing what came up for them, why they're in the bullpen, and other people observing what came up for them. I had such an aha moment that I had such deep rooted stuff from grief of losing my brother in a motorcycle accident when I was in second grade that I was an emotional wreck. And that was the beginning like back in April, of a series of stuff that I've been unpacking and realizing how grief has affected my operating systems, to major anxiety when my kids go off to do stuff without me there, of like just constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, and so many things I can speak into, but I won't take the time here. But the equine therapy did so much more for me in 6 weeks than years of talk therapy. I was able to see my behavior in my operating systems just by watching Rob work with a horse that had major abandonment and anxiety issues. And I'm such a visual learner that I realized looking back why this was so powerful for me, because I'm such a visual learner. I can hear stuff and read stuff, but to see it and realize, as a therapist was guiding us as he was working with the horses, was so powerful for me. And then being in a group setting was even more powerful, because I realized one of my fears from grief was the fear of emotional intimacy with people because of fear of loss. So to be in a group setting where we had to share and I had to open up and I got to hear feedback was so powerful for me. And so in a space that I needed to be to heal because of that awareness of emotional intimacy, that was hard for me to move through.
So you would suggest then with your answer
Well, that was a
that
long
this is,
way to answer your question.
well, it is, but that's fine. I like the color that you put around it. So, I mean, this is for people that have experienced the loss 40 years ago, and pieces of it are still affecting them, and they haven't cycled through all of that. So I think that's what I hear in your answer, right?
Yes, yes, yeah. Maybe they know that there's lingering grief, but they can't quite put their finger on why they can't process through something. This would be really powerful for them.
Okay, so I'm going to get to you, Jill, in just a second. Rob, as you work with people through grief from time to time, in your opinion, who is our grief relief retreat for?
Oh my God. That's the same thing question you ask about anxiety and everything. I think at one point in everyone's life, everybody experiences grief on one level or another, one individual level or another, because each person in the world, when they experience whatever they experience, they take it in differently, they decipher it or define it differently, they frame it differently inside, and they act differently or respond differently within their grief. So there's to pigeonhole putting it on a certain time or anything. I think this could be for anyone that is going through residual grief that may possibly have it. And I like what you said, Teresa. You know, this is for also people that have been, you know, they should have grieved 40 years ago, but they didn't. You know, they made it through a lot of it, but there's still this little compartment of a box that's locked up inside them that's got that residual grief in there that they haven't worked through yet. And so, you know, it's for those people also, but it's also for people that have just now, maybe this year, experienced grief. I lost my mom this past year. And so I went through that. I grieve a little bit different than everybody else. I think it's for everybody, the whole world. But like Dr. Jill said, there's a time and a place when you're ready for a program like this, or even going to a psychotherapist. You know, you've got to have your own individual time and place in order to work through some things before you're even ready for counseling or therapy or a program like this right here. So that's my point of view.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I'm going to come to you, Jill, because you know you've been a suicidologist for most of your life, and so you've been around death and grieving a huge chunk of your life. Now you sit on the board for Eric's House, which is a place for folks to go after sudden loss, and they experience sudden loss in their life. So you're around, and you have a front row seat to this stuff all the time. So, in your expert opinion, who's best served coming to a retreat like this, Jill?
I'm going to answer that question by telling you who is not necessarily the right candidate for this retreat. I would say, you know, Rob did a great job of saying everybody grieves differently. And I think anybody who's tuning into this can wholeheartedly agree. I don't believe that there is one timeline for grief,
Yeah.
but I do know that for some, especially those that are still living in immense pain, that are possibly still in a state of shock and denial, that haven't really started peeling back those layers of agony because you're really just trying to get out of bed in the morning and you're trying to remember to eat and to take how many breaths in 1 minute. For that group, this may not be the right fit yet. I'm going to say yet, because that is really acute pain. And until that acute pain is kind of cleaned up a little bit, this may be a really tough spot for you. But I don't necessarily want to put a time limit to it, right? Because I know that one survivor that is 3 months out can be functioning very, very well. And another survivor from whatever trauma, from whatever loss, from whatever grief can be 3 months out and truly, honestly, is putting 2 different colored shoes on their feet in the morning, right?
Mhm.
So I just say, look internally. I mean, I feel like this retreat is so beautiful and it is going to be healing in so many non-traditional ways. I will be the first person to tell you that talk therapy is not the end all, ladies and gentlemen. I love what Teresa said earlier, right? The 6 weeks that she had with Rob were more helpful to her than years of talk therapy with a counselor.
Mhm.
That may be the case for some, it may not be for others, but I think what we're learning in 2023, especially post-pandemic, that it is no longer prescriptions and talk therapy are the only 2 things that we can rely on to get relief for ourselves. You guys, that is so Freud, like that is so 120 years ago. Can we move on past that? Like breath work. I have personally engaged in everything that we are going to provide for you guys during this retreat. And I can tell you, they are healing and powerful, and you will walk away with different tools that then you will gain during talk therapy. I also firmly believe in talk therapy. But so, I agree. This retreat is for so many people, but I do ask those that are really interested to look at themselves and say, am I strong enough right now? Because this is an unstructured environment. We're asking everybody who walks into that ranch to trust us, but it's an unstructured environment. So just, and if you have any questions, please contact us and we will walk you through it.
This is
How's
why
that?
Jill is here. Jill is the
Yes.
pro. This is why she's here. And I love this group so much. And I think if there's one thing that I love about this group, and it's the title of my podcast, right? Learn from people who lived it. It's that all 4 of us have experienced grief on a very deep level ourselves. And there is just something about being in the company and care of people that have been to war, have been to the thing that you're there to help work on. And so, Jill, I kind of want to punt back to you really quick, being the expert on grief. Don't you think that that's an element that separates us from other folks? Is that the 4 on this screen have all honestly gone to hell and back with our own grief?
Do you want to go to a hairdresser whose hair is ratty and hasn't been showered? I know that's such a silly example, but and part of it is humorous, right? I mean,
Yeah.
humor is the best way to work through some grief. But at the end of the day, I don't want to sit with somebody who hasn't experienced intense hardship. I don't want to be vulnerable and share my darkest moments and my deepest emotions that I'm afraid to share with my spouse, with people who have not weathered the storm. And I think energetically, well, I think the 4 of us are just great together energetically, but I think any participant for a retreat would energetically feel if the people that were leading the retreat could not relate to what they were experiencing.
So, Rob, I want to go to you. And one of the highlights of our retreat is the equine therapy that you're going to provide. And probably not surprising to you, and Teresa knows this too. We get asked all the time, like, okay, well, what does that mean exactly? Like, what's going to happen? And so
Right.
maybe you could help put the folks who are considering this, their mind at ease, and help them understand what our bit of equine therapy will be like, because they won't be actually in with the horses. We're going to be
Yeah.
monitoring you going through a session. Help us understand that.
Yep. So what is unique about my program, it's called Rite of Passage Equine Therapy, is that when I got out of the military, retired from the military, I went back to university, studied psychology, did not get the master's because I needed to get that program up and running. But one of the things that I learned working both with traumatized horses or horses that have any type of difficulties or issues is that people have empathy for the animals and stuff. And what a correlation that happened or happenstance is that the majority of people or clients that I was working with, these problem horses or horses that have issues and stuff, much like us, is that they had their own traumas and they had their own anxieties and they had their own phobias. So while I was working the horse, I found, before I even started back school, is where I developed the concept, I found out that there was this connection of like-mindedness, whether it be it's a horse and the person. But as soon as I started working with the horses and whatever their ailment was, is that the stories would come out in the people, whether it be abuse, whether it be some type of wartime thing, whether it be an accident, whether it be a loss of loved ones and stuff. And so it was really surprising that the commonalities between the horses and the people were exactly the same. The horses can't voice that, but you can see it in their mannerisms of depression or anxiety and fear and different things like that. And so that's what I went back to university and studied and developed an empathy-based psychotherapy program. And all I do is that, I've got therapists, licensed therapists and doctors that are part of our business. And what I do, or what I bring to the program, is I'm a bridge between behaviorism and horses and psychology and people. And so I bridge that gap and try to bring it to where people understand, what is going on with the horse. And as I explain it in human terms, they can see it transpire and see these things work out the same way, it triggers and everything else as we go through and everything. So it's a empathy-based psychotherapy program, which is nothing more than bringing clients to the process where they can, we call it projection. So you ask them about what is that horse going through? What did it go through? What is the experience? What is the thinking? What is its fears? And you get somebody that's been through, much like all of us, you ask them to talk about that animal and what it's going through, and guess what you're really hearing? You're hearing projection on their part of what's going on in their life, how they perceive what is going on in that horse's life. And that's the beauty of the program. It acts as a conduit of taking kind of the pressure off of the person and being able to talk about the animal instead of talking about themselves. But what we found is as soon as that starts happening, especially in a group setting, that everybody else starts coming out with their own stories. And so the horses offer you a way of bringing out your own story and being able to express some of those things that people lock up inside. And so that's what I do. That's what I'm fortunate to get to do it all.
Yeah, it's so cool. And well, we have the expert again to the left because you went through his 6 weeks program, Teresa. And so you can maybe add some color to what he's just said. Was that your experience in watching these horses? Were you learning things about yourself?
Yes. So there's many things I learned about myself. I know I'm supposed to share this because I'm getting all nervous to share. Anyways, so the first week of our session was working with this abandoned horse, right? Had gone through how many owners?
Had been pulled out of the wild, out of the BLM, Bureau of Land Management. management. It was a wild Mustang, and had been in 6 different homes with probably a multitude of more than 6 trainers trying to work with. Boone was the horse that we got to work with. And he washed out of every single home, every single trainer, because they didn't know how to deal with trauma in horses. Is nothing more than no less.
So what Rob shared in just the first, I mean, each session, but we started in the first session, I had such an aha moment, is how do you build trust and communication with someone who has struggled with these issues, right? And so just watching his body mechanics, the way he would interact with the horse was he'd come in and greet the horse kind of side, not straight on because that was too forceful, just kind of come in and put his hand out and let Boone come up to him and then walk away. And so it's like it was this constant dance of going into this new space with someone who has these issues and then backing off, putting pressure on them, backing off until they build this trust, this pattern, this new way of being that they'll start to build trust with you. And then you can learn to communicate with them in a new way once you've established that trust. And what I was seeing within myself that was so powerful was I have a tendency, my whole life I've been told I'm so persistent. You're so persistent. And as I got older, I was like, oh, you're pleasantly persistent. Sometimes it's not pleasantly persistent. But I think that there was a connection for me in me dealing with grief. If I got to a place that when I was younger, dealing with grief, some of my needs weren't being met because of what was going on, what my parents were dealing with, right? And so I got to a place of where, well, I'm just going to take care of myself and I'm going to take care of my needs, right? And so that's where I could get very forceful and like, this is what I want and I want to take care of it and I'm going to do it myself. So as I was watching Rob work with the horse and have that new way of communication, I saw myself and how sometimes I'm so persistent to where I drive my husband crazy or other people that I need to come in and have interaction, establish that trust and communication and back off and let them come into my space on their terms. So powerful for me. To be honest, I came home and I was a mess. I had a conversation with my husband. I was crying and I apologized. Like I was a mess like for hours afterwards. It was such an aha moment for me. Whew. Just in that first session was so big. And then I realized how much I sometimes get forceful because I've gotten into taking care of my needs because my needs weren't met when I was younger, that I realized I have to come in, say hi, communicate, and back off and wait for that person to come in my space when they're ready. So that was just one little piece I took away from the first session.
Incredible.
I am so excited for this after listening
to
Teresa. Just that girl. Thank you, A, for sharing that because Bob did such a good job practically of explaining his skill and what he does, and you just gave it real experience and emotion. And now I'm understanding it even greater. That was beautiful. Thank you, girl.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's really our intention the whole day, is to give you just experience after experience where you can start to unlock these things for yourself. Because maybe you can speak to this, Teresa, not to keep putting you on the spot, but how has coming to understand that then, how have you been able to work with those thoughts, feelings, and emotions to make a life that you want for yourself?
I feel like I'm still finding my new ways of being and new ways of unfolding things. So I feel like I'm unpacking so much, and the foundation that I thought I knew has been totally like taken away from me, which has been very scary and vulnerable. There's so many moving pieces that I had to stick to trust the process. Like I'm learning a new way of being in so many ways that now I'll start a conversation and another thing from people sharing in the group was like, learn to read the room more. I'm trying to remember, Sean, one of the participants said it, like the pacing, like get into the rhythm of feeling what's going on around you so that you know how to have that coming in, taking off pressure, right? And so when I find myself trying to push my agenda too much because the fear of things are so uneasy and I don't know what's going on that I have to trust the process. I just have to back off and be like, okay, trust the process, like let things unfold like they're supposed to, right? That I will be taken care of. So I'm still learning it, but I'm much more aware when I go into that energy of push energy rather than wait, like feeling what's being called or what's coming my way and not pushing my agenda. Does
I
that
love
answer your
that.
question?
Yeah, no, completely. And I love that your mantra is trust the process of life, because when I went through my healing retreat, that was literally my mantra was I let go and I trust the process of life.
Mm.
And I'm done just trying to control everything. And that's really where we get ourselves into trouble with any one of our traumas, is that we try to kind of control the feelings, and we manage the feelings in a way. And part of what you have to understand is that you need to let it go. You need to let go of that control, and you do need to trust this process. And I think I speak for all of us. That is our goal on October 14th. And then I think there's a November date and a December date. But our goal is to literally help give you tools so that you can understand, A, kind of why you've been hanging on to some things, and then B, figure out a way to sort of start to work with letting them go so that you can create more space for yourself. Jill, I
Yeah.
want to come back to you for just a second. When we start to rewire and we start that process of healing, like Teresa said, it's not very sexy, it's not very pretty, it feels a little unstable, it can be a little bit rough. But what is the benefit of having a tool set that you can use when the stuff shows up?
Mm.
So you can't move forward if you continue to stand still, right? And so what I see happen over and over in grief in particular, or anxiety, is we just keep repeating the same habits over and over again, and we say, but this is all I know. This is
Yeah.
how I was taught, right? And it's just having somebody nudge you or push you to remind you that there are other things available to you. There are other ways. And Teresa just explained that. I mean, she just kept repeating the cycle, living the way she had lived for years and years because she didn't know any different. Well, if you don't have exposure to something, for example, like this retreat, that is going to show you so many other ways. I mean, we haven't even gotten into, which would be fun maybe for a separate podcast, but the breath work that Teresa is going to do and the body movement. I'm a huge believer in the body keeps score. And for those of you that are listening that know it, this is where we're going to put that into practice. For those of you that don't understand it,
Mm.
your grief takes home in your body. It will find its way into your shoulder or your liver or your kidney. And it's amazing just by moving in particular ways, which Teresa is extremely skilled in. Breath work, diaphragmatic breathing, like just gaining, Matthew said, gaining control, learning how to regain control of yourself first before you try to control the rest of the world, which while you're grieving and reliving trauma, what is the number one thing? You feel like you have no control. That's what creates the spin out, right? And so we are just the little tools, to answer your question, the little tools that we are going to introduce to you, primarily that Matthew, Rob, and Teresa are going to introduce to you, are tools that can shake you out of your mold and teach you more. Teresa, sorry, you gonna say something?
No, go ahead. I have a thought to say, but go ahead and finish.
There's going to be so many takeaways. And really, to me, the retreat for any participant is going to be successful if you just walk away with one takeaway. But there are going to be so many takeaways for how you can approach your life differently after this one day. Teresa.
Well, I'll speak into the breath work. So I've been doing body work for 23 years and just teaching my clients how to breathe while I'm working on them. I can feel the fascia, I can feel the muscle release, because so many people are in short, shallow breathers that I have to coach them why they think they're breathing in a way. Just by like inhaling and exhaling with your jaw dropped open, like you're sighing versus blowing through a straw. So a lot of people, when they exhale, it's like they're blowing through a straw. Your body constricts. You exhale like you're sighing, everything just relax. And so I have to coach them as I'm working on them. Just that alone makes a huge difference. And then as I do emotional release work with my yoga background, that's another piece, is like somatically I've gotten in my sessions where are you feeling this? Like you said, it shows up in different ways, right? So as emotions releasing, I talk them through where are you feeling this in your body? Because so many people are disconnected of where they feel the visceral somatic response of a release of emotion or an emotion in general when it's trapped, right? And so this helps them to get more in their body. And this is the type of work I'm going to do in the yoga session, is working on releasing the hips and the psoas, which is where a lot of people hold trauma, and like your root chakras there. And that's where a lot of your childhood beliefs are kept. So like when I do the release sessions, emotional release sessions, I really work on opening up the root chakra, the heart chakra. So that's just a little bit about the movement that we're going to be doing, is really help people get in their body to feel where is it bubbling up, what's coming up for you, to connect with that, not to like push it away, because I did that for so long, like suppress, and then all of a sudden it starts to manifest and it starts to change the vibration in your body. That's where you start to get disease, dysfunction, and shut down in your body. So just having little things like this, the awareness, right? Like having that experience for me in the third session with my daughter was such an awareness piece. Once you have awareness, then you're able to make a decision. You're able to make a decision on what's next for me. But the part I always like to say is so in that session, I knew I needed more, but then all my what ifs came up. I don't know if I can afford it. I don't know if I can make the time and take Fridays off work. All those excuses started coming up. And I said, stop. And like, when I get a nervous feeling in my gut or my heart space, I was like, I'm supposed to do this. I don't know necessarily how I'm going to pay for it or how it's going to work out. I rearranged my work schedule and I figured it out. But that's the part I always invite people to do, is when you have something that starts to come up, when you're listening to something, you're watching something that's nervousness energy, what is that telling you? I feel like that's your intuition telling you that this is what you're supposed to be doing next. And a lot of people don't lean into that. And so that part gets shut off. They get disconnected on leaning into what their intuition, their spirit, whatever you want to call it, is guiding them to do next. And that's the piece I encourage people to really listen to, because if you want to stop repeating your negative patterns, you need to start listening to that inner voice.
So we'll start to wrap up here. Rob, I want to come to you and say, who is that beautiful horse right behind you? Is that one of the horses that we're going to be working with?
This particular horse is named Boss, and his story is a little bit more. That over on in front of him is called Adara. Adara is who we will be working with. But Boss's story is he's a 17-year-old hunter jumper, so he was a show horse. He went to another home, and the nonprofit was trying to get him back because they weren't living up to the expectations of what he was supposed to be doing and everything. So they ended up taking him back to court, and the people that had him did a number on him as soon as they found out that they had to give him back. And so they put it in their will to beat this horse. And so it would be no good to anybody else, especially men. And so that's where I come into play. And I used him for a few sessions out at a different place, different location for the last year or so. He's still got a little bit of residual things that trigger him every now and then. He's got through most of his stuff, so he's functional. And my wife, Barbie, she rides him about every other day, and it's just a dream horse come true. But when you put him in certain situations, he can react. Adara's story is she's another BLM horse, Bureau of Land Management, wild Mustang. And much like Boone's story, she was tore out of her environment. So the grief story that we're going to tell is that, I guess in the DSM-5, they talk about grief has to be, or prolonged grief has to have death. But there are other types of grieving, and you don't necessarily have to have death in order to grieve through a process. You can grieve through a divorce. You can grieve through moving away from a place. You can grieve from being like her, torn away from your herd and your environment, and then it's much like trafficking, and put into jail because they've lived free their whole lives and stuff. And so she came to us after she was in 4 different homes and a lot of different trainers. And she didn't make it through those homes. So this was her last chance right here. And she's got, she's beautiful. She's just a drop dead gorgeous horse that's got her foot in the bucket right now. but but she is calmed down because I haven't put any pressure on her to bring her out. I just let her be her, let her do things in her own terms and time. And so we'll use her in the grief session and some of the sessions that are coming forth over the next month or so. We'll use her in those PTS sessions as well. So that's Adara, and Adara is who we're going to be using. But everybody will get to see Boss too.
That's great. It's really going to be a fabulous day, guys. We've been thoughtful about how we put this together. We think 1 leads to 2, leads to 3, leads to 4, leads to you going home with a whole set of really great tools. And everything will start with the pre-Zoom session with myself and Teresa and Jill, and then we'll have our retreat, the dinner. We have the river ceremony, which we'll get you to and from. We're going to gift people really nice journals that they're going to be able to take home. We're going to gift people a yoga mat that they're going to be able to take home. So there's going to be some neat pieces to this thing. And if you really listen to us today and you say, you know what, this is for me, this is what I need to do for me, then we have the link in the show notes. And I encourage everybody over to just hit the link right now. Sign up for it right now. Do it today. Don't second guess this another minute. If grief is in your way, allow us an opportunity to move it, or at least help you create some space for something different. We'll start kind of how we did. And so, Teresa, any final thoughts from you as we wrap up?
I'm just going to circle back to what I said last, is if you're feeling that nervousness come up, that maybe this is something that you need to look into, or this is for you, like Matthew said, don't hesitate, make it happen. I always say people spend their time and money and resources where it's a priority for them, and you're a priority, right? So if you've been holding out on doing self-care and helping yourself heal, make yourself a priority and sign up for the retreat if that's what's calling you.
Beautiful. Rob, final thoughts from you.
Oh my God, I'm just excited about doing this. This is the first one that I get to do with horses, and so that brings me a lot of joy that we can reach a slightly different population with the same stories with the horses and everything. So it's just, if you want to learn how to deal or learn how to communicate with not only with other people and yourself better, come see us and watch what we do with the horses and stuff, and hopefully we give you some tools and thoughts and to go home and start that healing journey.
Love it. Jill, we turn to you for the final thoughts and the final finale. Go ahead.
I will say that I think all 4 of us are looking forward to hugging each and every one of you physically and emotionally. And we could not thank you for trusting us more.
Amazing. October 14th is our first one. There'll be 2 more dates after that. The link is in the show notes. Go hit it right now. Go sign up right now, and we'll see everybody on the 14th. Thank you guys for your time today.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, guys.